So Tim Pool sat down with the Libertarian commenter and comedian. Is he still a comedian? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Dave Smith. I had a debate with Dave Smith years ago. I
have to go back to that one.
Yeah, I'm curious as to. I haven't listened. I mean, it was 6, 7, 8. I don't know. I don't even know when it was. It was a long time ago. He seemed like a nice guy, but also had libertarian ideas. So I imagine that was. But you know, he also seemed like a smart guy. Which, if he's gonna go on Tim Pool, sometimes that tends to be a problem for Tim. Yeah. Because even like a smart libertarian is going to be kryptonite for Tim Pool, because Tim is going to wade into anything that he doesn't know about.
Especially one that takes pride in details.
Right. Here is Tim Pool and libertarian comedian Dave Smith talking about Donald Trump's foreign policy record.
There's a war powers resolution coming up. This is the big project of the Libertarian Party right now, to try to get you to go call your congressman. There's a bill in Congress.
He's just talking about Yemen, anti-Yemen war stuff right now.
And I will say that there's a lot that that Dave Smith is going to be talking about that I agree upon. I don't necessarily come at the same conclusions from the same place, but this is one of those areas where things intersect. The problem with libertarianism is in my mind, is economic and the political choices there. But from a standpoint of like having Congress revitalize the War Powers Act, revoking the authorization for use of military force, largely speaking, I think there's some agreement here. But remember, Tim Pool doesn't have an ideology. He just knows that his money comes from Trump supporters.
He's a Republican, yeah.
Here we go.
The House and the Senate to try to bring an end to this genocide.
I gotta push back a little bit, just because I think in terms of war, Trump was the best president of my lifetime.
Why?
Because he was getting our troops out. He didn't start any new ones.
He didn't start any new ones. He definitely gave it his best try when he murdered Soleimani, and could have gotten us into the worst war in the last 20 years.
I didn't say it was. I didn't say that was good. Who was better? Every other president in my life started several wars. And so I understand, like, bro, drone
okay, but listen, I like that talking point. I like that the talking point is he didn't start a new war, rather than it being like he was so great because he was so like he was such a war hawk, like it would have been with previous Republicans. But I mean, okay, he didn't start any new wars. That is technically true. Again, he flirted in Iran and flirted in Venezuela. But, you know, the number of civilian casualties actually went up in his, he didn't end any of the wars. He continued all of them.
I also want to add that not only did civilian deaths in Afghanistan grow, also in Somalia and in Yemen. This was by design. He specifically loosened the terms of engagement that allowed for more civilian deaths. I mean, specifically. He did so starting, I think it was in 2017. So that's not by mistake. Now, that's not technically a new war, although you're basically saying we're going to increase our civilian casualties but go ahead.
Actually went up in his, he didn't end any of the wars. He continued all of them. I give him all the credit in the world. He authored the deal that ultimately ended the war in Afghanistan. And by the way, even though he botched the execution, I give Biden credit too for ending that. Fine. But Donald Trump was the commander-in-chief for 4 years on the promise that he was going to end these wars.
I know.
No excuse making for that. He kept them all going for all 4 years.
I think the difference in our perspectives is, because I agree with you, but my thing is like, I have to be positive on people who are making progress so that we can continue to encourage the election of people who will follow further and further in that direction of.
But then I'll say, if we want to make progress, but he didn't really make progress, is what I'm saying. If more people are being
Abraham
killed,
Accords.
what is that? So that's a what deal? What peace did he strike with who?
So when you have planes that are traveling over Israel,
right?
When you have countries like, what is it, Saudi Arabia, among other Arabic nations that are now allowing an inter-country commerce, it's just a step in the right direction.
No, there was no war between Saudi Arabia and Israel. There was no war between the UEA
go to the country if
and
you didn't
Israel.
if you had the passport stamp.
So basically, what he did was in these peace deals is he basically bought off these other Muslim countries to be friends with Israel when they had vowed to not be friends with Israel over their treatment of the Palestinian people. And so we bribed them with U.S. taxpayer dollars to look the other way and let Israel do what they want to do to the Palestinian people in order to not be enemies with them. So if that's a peace deal, fine. But if I'm talking about the actual wars, the war
Pause it for 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me just add that all of that commerce was happening backdoor channels. It just made it more official. And it wasn't just a question of no longer abandoning the Palestinian people. It was also about hegemony against Iran. And for whatever reason, I don't know if they even touch on the Iran nuke deal, which, talk about not starting a new war. You have essentially planted the seeds of something really horrible to happen. And Biden, to his discredit, has been unable to re-enter that deal. He should have just on day one said, we will no negotiations, no conditions. We will just go back to where we were when we left with an apology. He didn't do this, but Trump started created this situation, which was far trickier to get back into than I think people anticipated. And the Abrams Accord was very much about isolating Iran, putting more heat on Iran, having us a step closer to a conflict with Iran. They don't bring that up, but
the peace deal, fine. But if I'm talking about the actual wars, the war in Yemen, the war in Somalia, the wars in all of these countries, no, he didn't end them. So that's the type of peace deal I'd be looking for. So I agree with you. I want to see progress, but I think the way to get progress is to say no, that's not good enough. We're actually expecting when you run on saying we're going to end the wars, that means end the freaking wars. End them all. This is insane.
Agreed.
We're bankrupting our country to be the empire of the world. And for what? What do we even get out of it? What do we get? Okay, in the last 20 years, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria.
Okay. And someone just said, New Wave Libertarian Communist just said, Sam, did you know Dave Smith has hosted neo-Nazi and Nick Fuentes 3 times on his podcast, as well as Christopher Cantwell, and agreed that liberals and the media are anti-white? I did not know that, and I certainly don't want to give it I'm playing this because it was fun to watch Tim Pool get schooled on this stuff.
Right.
But the thing where he goes off the rails here is, what do we get for it? What a libertarian will also do in this instance is pretend that the beneficiaries of this are not the corporate entities that they so desperately want to be unregulated and essentially leave our lives to. The so-called free marketeers and the privatizers, essentially, they are making money hand over fist. And every time I'm sure that any type of libertarian will talk about diminishing the size of government, because that way corporations can't have influence over them, seem to completely misunderstand physics and the idea of power. No one is strong in a vacuum. It is relative to what they need to accomplish with that strength. If you need to pick up a 5-pound weight, everybody's strong. If you need to pick up a 500-pound weight, not many people are strong. So you diminish the size of government, all you're doing is increasing the relative size of the forces that want to extricate resources from the people in one fashion or another. That's it. That's the way this works. That's why the corruption on a local level is always more extensive than on a national level, because like one big player can come in and buy the whole town.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment on. I didn't know that about Dave Smith. I saw him on Rogan talking about Yemen a while ago, but that sort of like the sort of race stuff doesn't surprise me for somebody like sort of with ties to the Mises Institute and that sort of thing. I did watch what happened before this on the Tim Pool Dave Smith interview, and he did suggest that the George Floyd protests were like a sort of intelligence astroturfed plot against Trump. So yeah, he's a lunatic on domestic stuff like that.
Right. That's the thing, folks. I mean, it's always a danger when you're trying to compliment a libertarian for one of their few views.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear. It wasn't so much complimenting him as just showing like it was just an opportunity. It's one of the few times that Tim Pool will bring somebody on when he thinks he's going to be in agreement with them. And then he finds out that he's not.
Yeah.
That's what's so funny about that. Why didn't anybody brief me on the fact that Trump wasn't so great on foreign policy?
The best in the lifetime talking point. That's a right wing online sort of thing that they've gassed themselves up to think is actually true. And no appreciation from those folks of like, yeah, the Iran deal.
Right. That's just, man, what are you going to do?
That's Obama. That's cuck stuff.
How old is he? 30 years?
Tim Pool?
Yeah, 40.
If he's younger than me, I'll be irritated.
He's 36. He's 36.
I mean, so I guess that takes him back to Reagan. Best in my lifetime. I mean,